Today's presentation is going to be on premarital cohabitation and marriage longevity. All that glitters is not gold. Hi there everyone, my name is Nichole Golpashin. A little bit about me is that I'm in my last year here at UC Davis. I'm a sociology major. This is going to be my FRP presentation for the fall quarter of this SOC class, SOC 135. So for today's presentation, I'm going to give you a brief intro. I'm going to introduce you to my thesis, touch on a few lecture concepts, give you some background. We're going to discuss the significance of the topic. We are going to go over the discussion of counterarguments and evidence also supporting the thesis. Then we'll be diving into the conclusion and lastly going over some references. So first things first, here are some lecture concepts that I'm going to discuss throughout the presentation. They are going to be long-term relationships, marriage, divorce, cohabitation, same-sex marriage, institutionalization and deinstitutionalization, gender roles, pressures on marriage, social norms and expectations, and domestic arrangement. Just keep an eye out for these. They're going to be underlined throughout the presentation. These are some concepts that we went over throughout our quarter. So this is just a funny picture I saw while I was researching my topic. It's a guy and a girl who apparently are living together. They received a card congratulating them from one of their mothers. Something that you would probably receive as if you were getting married. The mother said, statistically, if you eventually marry, you'll probably get divorced, which is funny. It's a little foreshadowing about the rest of this presentation. I thought it was a little funny comic that I just wanted to add in there so you guys could get a little enjoyment out of that. So this could be debatable, but if you ask most couples, they ultimately have a goal to spend a lot of time together, share a life together. However, modern practices show that marriage is not a requirement to achieve that ultimate goal. Cohabitation allows two unmarried individuals to live together to kind of go on a trial basis, trial run. All the benefits of marriage without the full commitment that it brings with it. So some of those benefits include intimacy, which that can include emotional benefits. That could be, getting to share emotions with that person you're living with, your partner. Physical intimacy, which would be, just as it sounds, physical touch. Spiritual intimacy, which would be joining your spiritual lives together. Volitional would be something such as creating commitments outside of marriage, such as, getting a puppy together, something like that. So another benefit would be saving money. How you can do this is obviously rent or mortgage, utilities, food, car expenses, and wedding costs. So obviously with the first four, those are more so, can be like split down the line depending on how you guys arrange it. The wedding costs are a little bit different. Obviously, if you are not getting married, you're not spending thousands on thousands of dollars on a wedding. So obviously you save money. So a trial run is the third point, the third benefit. That could be, if you're living with somebody, you get to know their habits, the kind of things they do, their quirks. Do they put the toilet paper on the roll incorrectly or in a strange fashion? Practicalities would be something like how they eat, what they consume, what they like to consume, if they wake up early, if they like to work out. Another thing could be reducing marriage pressures. And so what that means is not having to deal with the societal pressure of getting married. This can also be if, the pressure of having to move into a house after getting married. Moving isn't an easy task. So if you're doing this after you get married, that creates a bunch of, stress that you wouldn't have had if you were originally living with that person prior. So this sounds great, right? I mean, what could go wrong? So many benefits. Strangely enough, the rate of divorce is much higher for those who decide to live with their partner before marriage. So why? Why is this the case? So in my paper and in this presentation, I will argue that the strong association between premarital cohabitation and increased rates of divorce is primarily due to the casual nature of the practice and the incomplete commitment that accompanies it. So here are a few definitions that will be helpful for you to know during my presentation. I'm sure many of you know them, but a little clarification never hurt. So the first one is going to be cohabitation. So that is living together as or as if a married couple. So the next one's institutionalization. This would be to incorporate into a structured and often highly formalized system. So in the context of marriage, this would be like a diamond ring, a church, and so on. So in that same vein, disinstitutionalization is a deconstruction of the idea of what marriage is supposed to be in the US and, making it whatever you want it to be. So marriage dissolution is the next definition. That would be the termination or destruction by breaking down, disrupting, or dispersing. So in a nutshell, this would be like divorce or separation. So the last definition is something many of us are familiar with. The role or behavior learned by a person as appropriate to their gender, determined by the prevailing cultural norms. So not that long ago, as recently as the 1970s, this practice was quite uncommon. That has obviously since changed. Cooperberg, in a 2018 study, showed that women ages 19 to 44, which would be, the age that most women typically get engaged or married, had higher rates of premarital cohabitation, which doubled from the 1980s to the 2000s. So in the first graphic, there's a large increase in cohabitating couples, and this was just over the span of a year. In a year, there were about 1 million more cohabitating couples, as you can see in the lower left 2 hearts, the graphic below. As we can tell, there's a trend. The number of marriages decreased while cohabitants increased. This shows that overall, many people are opting out of getting married. So obviously now in the 2020s, we're in a much more progressive generation. The institution of marriage has changed quite a bit. It's gone through a massive transformation over the past 50 years away from the traditional social norms and expectations. As we know, divorce is much more common. Same-sex marriage is widely accepted. People are waiting until later in life to marry, and some couples live together and start families without ever getting married. This transition away from the status quo in older generations is to be expected within the context of a changing society. The younger generation has made it very clear that their preferred path forward involves deinstitutionalizing marriage in America. And why not? There seems to be so many great benefits, as mentioned, and I haven't really discussed the downsides of a non-traditional path. It seems appealing. Just look at this non-traditional couple and how happy they look, the 2 little robots I displayed on this slide. However, not all these changes have led to the best possible outcomes for relationships. So these are some interesting statistics that I got from Pew Research. The statistics show that overall the majority of people are pretty accepting of the idea of cohabitation in many contexts. So as you can see, 14% of people believe it's never acceptable for an unmarried couple to live together. 16% say that only if they plan to get married is it okay. And 69% say even if they do not plan on getting married, it is okay for an unmarried couple to live together. Definitely shows that people are way more accepting of this, and that many probably are opting out of the typical traditional marriage route. So obviously there seems to be many perceived benefits of premarital cohabitation, but living together before marriage has not shown to increase the success in relationships. There was a study done by Kerrigan and Bailey that showed that couples who lived together prior to marriage, had a 31.4% divorce rate versus 25.9% who had not lived together prior to marriage. In general, in this study and many other studies similar to it, if you live together prior to marriage, you statistically are more likely to have a bad outcome in your marriage and are likely to get divorced. You would think with all the benefits, all the benefits would outweigh the downsides. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. So now that we've established that, why does it matter? Why is this topic important? There are a few reasons, but the main reason that it's so important is that it is so much more common now. It's been demonstrated to be a viable option, and people are opting completely out of marriage and the benefits that come with that to engage in cohabitation. So you might ask yourself, why is divorce more common? Well, there are two schools of thought, two theories. The first one is going to be the selection effect. So what that means is that certain populations who are going to cohabitate also share the same characteristics that make them much more likely to be okay with getting a divorce. That would be, they're more progressive, less religious. They could tend to lean towards a more liberal side in politics. The second school of thought is a less common explanation, and this is impermanence. So what that essentially means is that, this is a trial run. It's a low commitment domestic arrangement. So you don't have to, if things go wrong, you don't have to get a divorce. You might not even have all your stuff at their house. These two theories are the main two schools of thought as to why divorce is more common. So diving deeper into the selection effect, there are studies that show that these two values, the more liberal, the less religious, happen to align with people who are more likely to cohabit. And by that same logic, they reason that these people who would never cohabit are the very same people who wouldn't be likely to file for divorce, even if they're in a really bad situation. So the second school of thought is impermanence. A direct quote from a study in 1992 by Axon and Thornton reads, "Cohabitations that end may reinforce the idea that intimate relationships are fragile and temporary in today's world. This view might reduce the expectation that marriage is a lifetime relationship and commitment, or it might weaken commitment to marriage as an institution." So this aligns with my thesis that, if you start with a casual foundation, you can feel like you can leave whenever you want, and it makes it that much easier to walk away. This is even supported by the most recent research by Kerrigan and Bailey, which was done in 2021, that shows when all the variables discussed are controlled for, there is still a statistically significant increase in divorce for people who participate in cohabitation. So what this means is that no matter what, if you're religious, not religious, liberal, progressive, no matter what, if you live together before marriage, you are statistically more likely to get a divorce. Easy come, easy go. So in conclusion, both of these theories on why this happens hold merit. There's no questioning that there is an increase of divorce when you live with someone before marriage. This presentation begs the question of why that is the case. Why is there an increase in the rates of divorce if you live together? Most studies subscribe to the selection theory. I don't doubt it holds merit. I think there's a component of that can be explained by this. However, given the most recent research, that is not the only reason. My thesis is supported by the new research that shows that the selection theory cannot explain this phenomenon alone, and therefore the impermanence theory is a reasonable hypothesis for its cause. Even with the variables controlled, we still have a higher rate of divorce in people who live together. So there is something else there, and I'm arguing that the something else is the impermanence theory. So wrapping up, here are some references on this super interesting topic if you want to do a little bit more research on it. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and please leave a comment with any thoughts and or questions, and I will get back to you. Have a great day.